Christmas Eve was always quiet in our small house. Outside, the snow fell in gentle, whispering drifts, muting the world with its cold embrace. Inside, the fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows over the living room, where the centerpiece of my grandmother's vintage Nutcracker collection stood on proud display. The Nutcrackers had always fascinated me. Each was unique, painted in vibrant hues of red, green, and gold, their carved faces frozen in stern determination. I used to imagine them as protectors, steadfast sentinels keeping watch over our family traditions. Tonight, though, as I sat alone in the dim glow of the fireplace, they seemed different. Their painted eyes glittered unnaturally, the firelight reflected in an unsettling way, as if the gaze of each soldier was trained squarely on me. I shook off the thought. Christmas was a time for warmth and joy, not for childish fears. Yet, as the clock edged closer to midnight, I couldn't ignore the prickle of unease creeping over my skin. Then I saw it. A note, folded neatly, sitting on the mantelpiece where I was certain nothing had been before. My heart gave a quick, startled thump as I reached for it, the crisp parchment cool against my fingertips. The handwriting was elegant but uneven, as though written in haste. Stay awake past midnight. The watchers must be observed. A chill slithered down my spine. I glanced around the room, but nothing seemed amiss. The Nutcrackers stood exactly as they always had, rigid and unmoving. But now the silence of the house felt heavier, as though it were filled with a presence I couldn't see. Midnight came swiftly. The grandfather clock in the hallway let out a single, somber chime, its sound lingering unnaturally long in the stillness. For a moment, nothing happened. I let out a shaky breath, feeling foolish for my earlier apprehension. And then I heard it. A faint, almost imperceptible scrape, like wood dragging over wood. My eyes snapped to the Nutcrackers and my breath caught in my throat. One of them had moved. It was subtle. Its rigid arm, once pointing straight down, was now bent at the elbow, the carved hand resting on its sword. The Nutcracker's face, always stern, now seemed to carry a faint sneer, its painted eyes gleaming in the dim light. I backed away slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. The room felt colder, the shadows deeper, and the once cheerful crackle of the fire now seemed like a mocking cackle. The note crinkled in my trembling hand. Suddenly, the sound of scraping wood grew louder, and my gaze darted to the others. One by one they were moving, heads turning with agonizing slowness, joints creaking as their bodies shifted. The largest Nutcracker, the captain of the collection, stepped forward from its pedestal with a hollow thud. I froze, unable to tear my eyes away as the captain turned its head to look directly at me. The other Nutcrackers began to follow, their movements stiff but deliberate, their once innocuous forms now brimming with a sinister intent. The note's warning rang in my ears. The watchers must be observed. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body refused to move. The Nutcrackers marched closer, their polished wooden feet thumping against the hardwood floor with a rhythmic precision that sent waves of dread rippling through me. I stumbled back against the wall, clutching the note as if it could somehow shield me from the advancing figures. The captain led the charge, its hollow gaze locked on mine. Behind it, the smaller Nutcrackers followed in perfect formation, their painted smiles splitting into grotesque mockeries of human expressions. Their silence was deafening, broken only by the relentless creak of their limbs. Desperation surged through me. I grabbed the fire poker from the hearth, holding it out in trembling hands like a lifeline. "Stay back!" I shouted, my voice cracking with fear. "I don't know what you are, but—" The captain stopped abruptly, its head cocking to one side in a gesture that was almost curious. Then, with a single deliberate movement, it raised its sword, the blade glinting in the firelight. The smaller Nutcrackers spread out, their wooden faces grotesquely animated. They began to encircle me, cutting off my escape route. My back pressed against the cold wall, and the fire poker felt like a twig in my hands, useless against the encroaching menace. That's when I noticed it. The gleam in their eyes wasn't just a reflection of the firelight. It was something else, something alive, flickering with malice. These were no longer the cheerful guardians of childhood memories. They were predators, and I was their prey. Desperate, I swung the fire poker at the nearest Nutcracker, its carved body shattering under the blow. But instead of stopping, the others moved faster, their formation tightening around me. Splinters of wood and chipped paint scattered across the floor, yet the broken pieces of the shattered Nutcracker twitched unnaturally. Panic overwhelmed me as I realized the truth. They couldn't be destroyed. Above me, the clock chimed again, its echo mingling with the hollow thuds of the marching Nutcrackers. Their movements grew sharper, more purposeful, as though they were responding to an unseen command. My eyes darted around the room, searching for a way out, but there was none. The captain raised its sword high, the blade glinting with cruel intent. I braced myself, my pulse hammering in my ears. And then, the captain spoke. Its voice was a low, grinding rasp, like ancient wood splintering under pressure. "You are unworthy." The room plunged into darkness as the fire extinguished itself, leaving me surrounded by the sound of scraping wood and hollow laughter. The darkness swallowed everything, but I could still hear them. The Nutcrackers' hollow thuds grew louder, closing in from every direction. My breaths came shallow and fast, each one laced with panic. I swung the fire poker blindly, the cold air splitting with each futile strike, but it was like fighting shadows. Their movements were too precise, too deliberate. And then, just as abruptly as it began, the noise stopped. I froze, clutching the poker like a lifeline, straining my ears against the oppressive silence. The darkness was impenetrable, heavier than it had any right to be, as if the very air had turned solid. My heart pounded against my ribs, each beat like a ticking clock counting down to something unspeakable. A faint glow pierced the darkness. It started as a dim ember, growing brighter with every passing second, until it illuminated the living room in a flickering crimson light. The source was the captain. It stood motionless at the center of the room, its carved eyes now blazing with malevolent fire. "You are unworthy!" it rasped again, the grinding voice resonating deep within my chest. The other Nutcrackers stepped back, forming a wide semicircle around their leader. The captain raised its sword, the crimson glow pulsing in sync with the rhythmic creak of its wooden arm. Behind it, the glow intensified, revealing something that hadn't been there before. An archway carved into the very fabric of the room. The arch was impossibly ornate, its edges lined with twisting runes that seemed to writhe and shift under the pulsating light. Beyond it, shadows churned like a living ocean, tendrils of darkness curling outward as if inviting me to step through. "This is your trial," the captain said, its tone a blend of authority and menace. "Enter, or be consumed." "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "This isn't real. It can't be real." But even as I said the words, I knew they were hollow. The oppressive air, the impossible archway, the unnatural glow, all of it was undeniably real, and it demanded something of me. I took a shaky step back, my body screaming to flee, but the semicircle of Nutcrackers tightened, their expressions twisted into grotesque parodies of glee. They were herding me toward the arch, their movements slow but unyielding. Behind them, the shattered Nutcrackers' pieces began to move again, The shards of wood crawled and slithered across the floor, knitting themselves back together with a sickening precision. Within moments, it stood whole once more, its painted grin as mocking as ever. I had no choice. With my pulse hammering in my ears, I stepped through the archway, the shadows closing around me like a second skin. The Nutcrackers watched in silence, their fiery eyes glinting with something almost akin to satisfaction. The last thing I heard before the arch sealed shut was the captain's voice, low and final. "The warden awaits." The transition was instantaneous. One moment I was in my living room, and the next I stood in a vast, cavernous hall carved from gleaming black stone. The air was thick and humid, carrying the scent of rotting wood and varnish. Towering columns lined the hall, each one etched with the same shifting runes that adorned the archway. At the far end of the hall, an immense figure loomed. It was a nutcracker, but not like the others. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, its frame was carved from a dark, splintered wood that seemed to ripple with an unnatural life. Its eyes burned with the same crimson fire as the captain's, but its face bore no expression, just a smooth, featureless expanse that radiated malevolence. I knew instantly. This was the warden. "You tread where you do not belong," it rumbled, its voice a deep, resonant echo that made the stone walls tremble. "You have called us with your defiance." "I didn't call you!" I shouted, my voice thin and desperate. "I don't even know what you are!" The warden tilted its head, the motion eerily fluid for something so massive. "Ignorance does not absolve you. You inherited the burden. You were meant to keep watch, yet you turned away." I didn't understand, but the warden gave me no time to ask. It raised one colossal arm, a jagged staff of blackened wood appearing in its hand. The runes along its length flared with blinding light, and the hall itself seemed to ripple in response. The floor beneath me shifted, splintering and reforming into a swirling labyrinth of jagged planks and snapping wooden tendrils. They lashed out, forcing me to dodge and stumble, each movement bringing me closer to the warden. In a blind panic, I swung the fire poker, shattering the tendrils as they lunged at me. But for everyone I destroyed, 2 more took its place, the fragments of wood writhing and rejoining the mass. "The Watchers are not your servants," the warden intoned, its voice a thunderous crescendo. "They are the guardians of the gate. You have failed them. Now you will take their place." The realization hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just a trial. It was a sentence. My grandmother's nutcrackers weren't whimsical decorations. They were prisoners, bound to guard against whatever lay beyond the gate. And now, I was being conscripted to join their ranks. "No!" I screamed, driving the fire poker into the ground with all my strength. The runes on the floor cracked and sputtered, the labyrinth faltering for a brief moment. Seizing my chance, I grabbed one of the splintered tendrils, its jagged edge cutting into my palm, and hurled it toward the warden. The shard embedded itself in its featureless face, causing the massive figure to recoil with a deafening roar. The glow of the runes dimmed, and the labyrinth dissolved into splinters. The warden staggered, its form cracking and splintering as I ran past it, toward the far end of the hall where a faint glimmer of light beckoned. I dove toward the light, my lungs burning, the warden's enraged roar echoing behind me. As the light enveloped me, I felt the weight of the shadows lift, and the suffocating heat gave way to the crisp, cool air of the living room. The nutcrackers were gone. The archway had vanished, leaving only the faint smell of varnish and ash. But as I looked down at my trembling hands, I saw them begin to stiffen, my skin taking on the sheen of polished wood. The transformation began slowly, almost imperceptibly. At first, I thought it was a trick of the firelight. But as I turned my hands over, the truth became undeniable. My skin had hardened, the lines of my palms etched into polished grooves. My joints creaked faintly when I moved, the sound sharp and alien in the stillness of the room. Panic surged through me, and I stumbled to the nearest mirror. The reflection staring back was not my own, or rather, not entirely. My face had begun to stiffen, my features taking on an unnatural smoothness, my eyes glassy and distant. The faint glimmer of crimson danced within their depths, a reminder of the warden's curse. "No," I whispered, the word rasping from a throat that felt tight and unyielding. "This isn't real." But it was real. The room was silent, oppressive, and wrong. The fire had died out entirely, leaving the living room steeped in shadow. My grandmother's nutcrackers were gone, yet their presence lingered, a faint trace of varnish and smoke clinging to the air. I staggered back, clutching the mantelpiece for support, only to find the folded note still there. Its pristine edges mocked me as I snatched it up, reading its single line over and over. "The Watchers must be observed." Was that it? Was this what it meant? Had my failure to heed the warning condemned me to this existence? As the minutes stretched into eternity, the house itself seemed to change. The walls groaned as if alive, their surfaces bulging and twisting, shadows pooling in the corners. From somewhere deep within, I heard the faint rhythmic thud of wooden feet marching. The sound grew louder, echoing through the space like a cruel melody. I tried to scream, but my voice failed. My throat was no longer mine. It had thickened, my vocal cords reduced to stiff fibers incapable of forming sound. My legs betrayed me, locking in place as the curse claimed more of my body. My vision dimmed, narrowing to a tunnel as my glassy eyes fixed forward. And then I saw them. The Nutcrackers emerged from the shadows, their faces twisted in triumph. They marched in perfect unison, the captain leading the procession with its blazing crimson eyes. But it was not me they surrounded this time. It was the fireplace. I felt it before I saw it, a great, unseen force pulling me backward, drawing me toward the hearth. My limbs, now wholly wooden, moved against my will, locking into a rigid, upright stance. My mind screamed in protest, but my body obeyed a new master. The flames roared to life again, illuminating the room in a flickering, hellish glow. The captain stepped forward, its wooden face tilting toward mine in what could only be mockery. It raised its sword in salute, the reflection of the fire gleaming along its blade. "You are now the Watcher," it intoned. "Guard the gate, or suffer the depths." With that, the Nutcrackers faded back into the shadows, their hollow thuds receding into silence. I was alone again, but not truly. My body was a prison, a statue carved from cursed wood. My glassy eyes stared endlessly at the darkened hearth, unable to close, unable to look away. And in the depths of the flames, I saw it. The gate. Its shadows writhed and twisted, a void that whispered promises of horrors beyond imagination. The Watchers must be observed. Forever.